I sat in my living room, the glow of the television casting a warm light across the room. The soft hum of the TV was a comforting background noise, blending seamlessly with the dim, cozy ambience of the space. The flickering light from the screen danced on the walls, creating eerie yet familiar shadows that seemed to move with the rhythm of the show. My cat, Whiskers, curled up on my lap, purring softly. His warmth was a soothing presence, a constant in the quiet evening. I could feel the gentle vibration of his purrs through my legs, a reminder of the simple joys of companionship. Whiskers had always been my loyal companion, especially on nights like these when the world outside seemed distant and unimportant. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the leaves. Everything seemed peaceful. The sound of the wind was like a whisper, a gentle reminder of the changing seasons. The leaves, now a tapestry of reds, oranges and yellows, danced in the breeze, creating a symphony of nature that contrasted with the stillness inside. It was a perfect night to be indoors, wrapped in the warmth of my home. I sipped my hot cocoa and settled deeper into the couch. The rich, velvety taste of the cocoa was a treat, a small indulgence that made the evening even more special. The warmth of the drink spread through me, adding to the coziness of the moment. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, savoring the comfort of my little sanctuary. The show I was watching was a light-hearted comedy. It was one of those feel-good shows that never failed to bring a smile to my face. The characters were like old friends, their antics and jokes a welcome distraction from the monotony of everyday life. I laughed along with the canned laughter, feeling a sense of connection even in my solitude. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, the only other sound in the room. Its rhythmic ticking was a constant, a reminder of the passage of time. Each tick seemed to echo in the quiet, marking the seconds of this tranquil evening. It was a sound that I had grown accustomed to, a part of the background noise that made up the soundtrack of my life. But then, Whiskers pricked up his ears. His sudden alertness broke the spell of the evening. I could feel his body tense. His purring stopped abruptly. It was as if he had sensed something that I couldn't. His eyes were wide, his gaze fixed on the doorway. It was unusual for him to react this way, and it made me uneasy. He stared intently at the doorway leading to the hallway. His focus was unwavering, his body still as a statue. I followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual. The hallway was dark, the shadows deep and impenetrable. I strained my ears, trying to catch any sound that might explain his behavior. But there was nothing, just the silence and the ticking of the clock. I followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual. The darkness of the hallway seemed to stretch on forever, a void that held its secrets tightly. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a sense of unease creeping in. What could have caught Whiskers' attention? I wondered if it was just his imagination or if there was something more to it. I turned off the TV and gently moved Whiskers off my lap. The sudden silence was almost deafening, the absence of the TV's hum making the room feel even more still. I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace of the evening. Whiskers jumped down and padded softly to the doorway, his curiosity leading him. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every creak and groan of the old house. I stood there for a moment, listening, my senses heightened. The silence was thick, almost tangible, wrapping around me like a blanket. It was a quiet evening at home, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. As I lay in bed, I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. It seemed to be coming from the attic above my bedroom. I frowned, wondering if a raccoon had somehow gotten in. The scratching was rhythmic, almost purposeful. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, illuminating the dark room. The scratching continued, growing louder and more insistent. I slipped on my slippers and slowly crept out of my bedroom, my phone's light guiding the way. The stairs to the attic loomed before me, shrouded in darkness. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. The scratching had stopped. The silence was deafening. I took a tentative step forward, the wooden floorboards creaking under my weight. Each step felt like an eternity. The air grew colder as I ascended, and I could see my breath in the flashlight's beam. I reached the top of the stairs and stood before the attic door. I gathered my courage and pushed the door open. I swept the flashlight across the room, searching for the source of the noise. Then I saw it. I felt a chill run down my spine. Whatever it was watching me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move closer. The shadows parted, and I saw a small, dark shape huddled in the corner. It was covered in something dark and sticky, and I realized with horror that it was blood. I took another step, and the shape moved again. It let out a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. I turned and bolted for the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't stop until I was back in my bedroom. The door slammed shut behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. The room was cloaked in darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. Shadows danced on the walls, creating eerie shapes that seemed to move with a life of their own. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in the silence. The growling had stopped, but the silence was even more unnerving. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The quiet was thick, almost tangible, pressing down on me from all sides. I strained my ears, trying to catch any sound, any hint of movement, but there was nothing. Just the oppressive, suffocating silence. I grabbed my phone and tried to call 911, but the signal was dead. The screen stared back at me, lifeless and unresponsive. Panic surged through me. I was cut off from the outside world, trapped in this house with no way to call for help. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I realized the gravity of my situation. I was on my own. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no one coming to save me, no one to help me. I had to rely on myself, and that thought was both terrifying and empowering. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I couldn't afford to lose my head now. I had to stay focused, stay sharp. I needed to get out of the house. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, the air growing thicker with each passing second. I couldn't stay here. Not with that thing lurking somewhere in the darkness. I had to move, had to find a way out before it was too late. I grabbed a sweater and my keys, preparing to make a run for it. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. I had to be quick, had to be silent. I slipped the sweater over my head and pocketed the keys, my mind racing with possible escape routes. I opened the bedroom door slowly, peering out into the dark hallway. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the floorboard sounding like a gunshot in the silence. I held my breath, listening for any sign of movement, any indication that I wasn't alone. But there was nothing, just the oppressive, suffocating silence. I crept down the hallway, my footsteps barely making a sound. Each step felt like a monumental effort, my muscles tense and ready to spring at the slightest hint of danger. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness swallowing everything in its path. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing in the silence. I reached the stairs and descended slowly, each step feeling like an eternity. The wood creaked under my weight, the sound amplified in the stillness. I winced with each noise, praying that whatever was out there hadn't heard me. The staircase seemed to go on forever, each step a test of my resolve. The living room was just ahead, and beyond that the front door. Freedom was so close, yet it felt like miles away. I could see the faint outline of the door in the darkness, a beacon of hope in the oppressive gloom. I quickened my pace, my heart racing with anticipation, but as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard it again. The scratching. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill down my spine. It was coming from the living room, the very place I needed to go. I froze, my mind racing with possibilities. What was it? Where was it? And most importantly, how was I going to get past it? The scratching continued, a constant reminder of the danger lurking in the darkness. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I had to be brave. I had to survive. The scratching turned into a soft, deliberate knock. I stood there, paralyzed with fear. The knock came again, louder this time. I took a step back, my eyes fixed on the door. I approached the door slowly, my hands trembling. I took a deep breath and opened the door. the hinges creaking ominously. The night air rushed in cold and biting, but there was no one there. The porch was empty. I stepped outside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. I turned back to the house, my mind racing. The whisper seemed to echo through the house, growing louder with each passing second. I followed the sound, my flashlight flickering as I moved. It led me down the hallway, back towards the attic. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't stop. As I reached the attic door, the whisper stopped. The silence was suffocating. I opened the door and climbed the stairs, the darkness swallowing me whole. I shone my flashlight around, searching for any sign of the source of the whisper. Then I saw it. In the corner where the shadowy figure had been, there was a small, old-fashioned mirror. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. My reflection's grin grew wider, more sinister. I felt a wave of terror wash over me. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. In the shadows behind me, I saw a pair of glowing eyes. They watched me with an unsettling intensity. I spun around, my flashlight flickering. The eyes disappeared, but I knew they were still there, lurking in the darkness. I stumbled down the stairs, nearly tripping in my haste. The house was silent, but I could feel the presence following me. I burst through the front door, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. The adrenaline coursing through my veins made everything feel surreal. The cold night air hit me like a slap, a harsh reminder that I was no longer in the safety of my home. It was a biting cold, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you shiver uncontrollably. I didn't stop running until I reached the street, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Each step echoed in the silent night, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just escaped. I turned back, expecting to see the eyes watching me from the windows, those piercing eyes that had haunted my dreams for weeks. But there was nothing. The house was dark and still, an eerie silence enveloping it. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I felt a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The silence was too complete, too unnatural. It felt like the calm before a storm. As I stood there catching my breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up and a chill ran down my spine. I realized something was wrong. The street was empty, eerily so. It was as if the entire neighborhood had been abandoned overnight. There were no cars, no people. Not even the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. It was a silence that felt oppressive, almost suffocating. I looked around, feeling a growing sense of dread. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, playing tricks on my eyes. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. The dread was like a weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I took a step forward, my footfall echoing in the stillness. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown. And then the ground seemed to shift beneath me. It was as if the very earth was moving, trying to swallow me whole. The street began to blur, the edges of my vision becoming fuzzy. It was like looking through a fogged-up window, everything distorted and unclear. The houses melted into shadows, their shapes twisting and contorting into something unrecognizable. It was as if the world around me was unraveling and I was powerless to stop it. I felt utterly alone, isolated in this nightmarish landscape. The familiar had become foreign, and I was a stranger in my own world. Desperation clawed at me as I tried to find a way out. Every direction seemed to lead to more darkness, more uncertainty. Then, in the distance, I heard a sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. I moved towards it cautiously, each step filled with trepidation. The sound grew louder, more distinct, guiding me through the shadows. Finally, I reached the source. It was a light, small but bright, cutting through the darkness. It was a beacon, a sign that I wasn't alone. Hope surged within me as I stood in the light. The terror that had gripped me began to loosen its hold, replaced by a fragile sense of safety. I looked back at the dark street, the shadows still lurking. But now I felt a determination to face whatever lay ahead. I wasn't going to let the darkness win. With a deep breath, I turned away from the light and walked forward, ready to confront the unknown. The night was still dark, but I was no longer afraid. I struggled to break free, but the mirror's pull was too strong. My reflection's grin grew wider, more sinister. I felt myself being drawn into the glass, the world around me fading away. I screamed, but no sound came out. The eyes watched me unblinking as I was swallowed by the darkness. I found myself on the other side of the mirror, staring out at my own reflection. I was trapped, unable to move or speak. My reflection smiled, a twisted grin that sent shivers down my spine. It turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the darkness. I was a prisoner, trapped in my own nightmare. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories.